Thank you all for being present today. We're going to have a very informative discussion, I believe, and very educational. And that's what social sciences is all about. We're about the students. I'm going to introduce our moderator for the discussion, and that is Mr. Scott Clemens. You may remember Mr. Clemens when he was the mayor of Panama City. He's presently the president of the Clemens Company. So please, I will turn it over to Mr. Scott Clemens. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and it's a pleasure to see this many people here today for what I view as a very timely discussion. If for no other reason, because last night was the last of the presidential debates, which was about foreign policy, and much of that discussion had to do with the Middle East. So as you know, we'll be talking about democracy in the Middle East. But more specifically, the central question we'll be focusing on, and our speakers will be focusing on, is Western democracy as we know it, is it applicable in the Middle East? And what I want you to tell you a little bit about is how the discussion is going to go. First of all, let me make it very clear that our purpose today is not to advocate any particular religious view, make any judgments about a particular religion, or about a particular political philosophy or a political approach in the Middle East. It's simply an exchange of ideas. We have a very talented and diverse group of speakers who are going to be able to help us walk through that discussion. They're going to provide us some important background that'll help us as we explore this central question about whether Western democracy is applicable in the Middle East. Now, we are here today largely because of the efforts of one individual in particular, and that is Mr. Medhat El-Mesky. Now, I've had the opportunity of knowing Mr. El-Mesky for a number of years. When I worked in the city of Panama City, he was very, very involved in improvements to the downtown area. He is an architect, an urban planner, but mostly for our purposes today, he is here because he is the co-founder and president of the Islamic Understanding Institute. So that organization, and through his efforts, are the reason that we're here today. And I don't really need to say this, but the other reason we're here today is because we have an educational institution in Gulf Coast State College that just isn't involved in giving students credit on certain things, but educating the entire community, bringing us together to explore different ideas and different perspectives. So to all of our friends at Gulf Coast, thank you very much for being our hosts. We really appreciate it. Dr. Buckler and us, I have missed something. I am going to go to our introductions. One other thing in the agenda. Let me make it clear that as we go through this agenda, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each of our speakers, and they're going to talk about one part of the background that helps us explore this subject. And there's going to be a certain time limit, so I'm going to help our speakers keep to the time frame because we have a very definite schedule that we have to keep. The other thing we do is you are going to have an opportunity to participate. So it's not just all of them talking. You may be hearing this, and a question may come up in your mind and say, I really want to know this. What's the perspective from one of these speakers on this question that I have? So what we're going to ask you to do is, Dr. Butler, are the cards already there, or will they be passed out? There are cards around already. So if you'll take those cards, and if you will write your question down, and also tell us if you want that question directed to a particular speaker. If you don't tell me that you want it directed to a particular speaker, I'm going to put the question up there and let any one or more of the speakers respond to that question. So if you want to be specific about which speaker, please let us know that. And depending on the number of questions we have and the time, we may or may not be able to get to all of the questions. We'll do our best. Okay? Our first speaker today, first one of our panelists, is Dr. David Fistine, who, as many of you know, is an assistant professor of political science here at Gulf Coast State College. He has a PhD from the University of Missouri in St. Louis and a master's in international relations from Troy State University. I think it's significant to recognize that Dr. Fistine lived under non-democratic rule in the regimes in communist Czechoslovakia and the Federal Republic of Germany before the unification. So he has, I think, what will be a very unique perspective in this discussion. So, Dr. Fistine, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for that nice introduction. Good afternoon. I'll get right to the point. Western democracy is a polity or a society where the government can be changed by elections as opposed to one where the elections are changed by the government. And just picked up this quote today or yesterday. I thought it describes democracy quite well. It's from Bernard Lewis, but it's kind of, it bypasses a lot of important issues, obviously. Another definition that I can give you is Western democracy is a form of government where representative democracy is combined with the principles of liberalism. Representative democracy, of course, being we elect representatives that make laws for us as opposed to direct democracy. And the principles of liberalism are really key here because first of all, Western democracy is often referred to as liberal democracy, but liberalism is really what got us democracy in the first place. 18th century liberals, which is completely different from what American liberals are today, came up with these principles, mainly liberty and equality, liberty to own property, equality, all men were created equal. They came up with those ideas to counter what the ideas were at the time in Europe about the king rules, he was put there by God to rule, and questioning his rule is a blasphemy. So they were questioning these ideas, and they put forward what liberals claim to be universal values of liberty and equality. To give a little bit more detail about how the democracy part works, you need fair and free competitive elections between multiple and distinct political parties. So we have that in the United States. We have two distinct parties. They stand for different things. Some people will say after yesterday, maybe they don't, but yes, they do. And there is a separation of powers into different branches. That again is handled differently by different countries. And there is a rule of law which is usually embodied in a constitution, but it doesn't have to be. The UK is an example where the rule of law is really the history from the Magna Carta till today. The point of rule of law is this: it is the rule, that you have to respect the rules of the government. Yes, but the important part is the government has to respect certain rules. The government is governed by the rule of law. Again, most of the time a constitution. And then a Bill of Rights. Again, some countries don't call it a Bill of Rights. They just have some sort of protection for civil liberties. But there has to be some sort of protection of civil liberties. Mostly we're talking about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. There are ways to substitute for that, and some democracies do that. Which you should be already seeing that there are many, many variations between liberal democracies. They're not all the same. Not everybody has specifically freedom of the press has to be there, otherwise it's not democracy. But freedom of speech and religion, sometimes, especially the religion part, is sometimes substituted by protections for minorities. Like Catholic Austria is Catholic, but there are protections for people who are minority religions. Let me explain the other big part about how democracy developed between its origins with the liberals, in their ideas, the French, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Madison and Jefferson and those guys, how it got from there to where we are today, because that is very important. The defining characteristic of Western democracy, besides all these things that I said, is that it has evolved over time. The Constitution was written, and how many of you are over the age of 21, white males, and own property, meaning at least an acre of land or a small business? All right, we got 3 voters. Now we're moving to 1830, and every white male over the age of 21 can vote. Raise your hands. Some of you will have to raise your hand many times, several times over, obviously. So now we're moving on into 1870, and males who are African Americans over the age of 21 can vote. In addition to all the other people that raised their hands already. So if you raised your hand before, you're still in it. You're 21, you're white, yeah. But here's the thing, so 1875, 1876 actually to be exact, the African American males lose the right to vote in the South. And the next point in time is 1920, when the women over the age of 21 can vote. So raise your hands if you can vote under these, and men, of course. So now it's getting a little bit more representative of what's in this room. And last, 1973, I think, if you're 18, you can also vote now. So everybody who can vote, raise your hands. Anybody who, yeah. So pretty much everybody now. So this is the history of how liberal democracy developed. But what you have to keep in mind, we cannot repeat that evolution anymore. If you're a country that throws off dictatorial rule, let's say Romania or Czechoslovakia, you cannot go back in time and start where the United States started and say, hey, that's how you guys started, this is where we're going to start. It just, I don't know, I can give you a good reason, but it doesn't work that way. You have to start where democracy, liberal democracy, is right now. So you're going to have to start with, women have the right to vote. 18 is usually the voting age right now. You have to start with some sort of protection for minorities. You have to start with rights of the accused, which is very important in the United States. Some countries, again, have different laws. Not everybody's laws are the same. And for the United States, for example, and for Finland, having guns is democracy. If I told you, turn in your guns, and you're going to say that's you're taking away our freedoms, what we consider part of democracy. It's in the Constitution. It's the Second Amendment. It is the Second Amendment, not the 10th. It's right after freedom of speech and freedom of the press. So the Finns are the same. You're not the only ones. Other countries completely don't agree with that, and they don't have it. Double jeopardy, for example, is only a big issue in some countries. It's a big issue for us and a few others, but it's not a big deal overall. So there are differences. A few other issues that distinguish different countries from each other, different types of democracies. Basically, we have constitutional republics, which is the United States. Republic stands for representative democracy, but it's bound by a constitution. We have constitutional monarchies, which there is a monarchy, but it's bound by a constitution, and there are elections, there is a parliament. There are parliamentary systems, parliamentary democracies. Some of these combine now. For example, the UK is a parliamentary democracy. Sometimes people call it the Westminster model. and a lot of countries like India and Pakistan and Israel, they all follow the Westminster model, which is parliamentary democracy. But for the Brits, you still have constitutional monarchy on top of that. There are presidential systems. There are semi-presidential systems. The difference is really we're a presidential system. France is a semi-presidential system. The president has some powers. They can dismiss the legislature, and they have certain other prerogatives, but they're not as powerful as our president. And then, of course, the last thing to look at is direct versus representative democracy, although direct democracy is kind of practiced in Switzerland. Pretty much every law the government makes, the people have to vote on it and approve it. But everything else are representative democracies. And I would like to end with, I will have to tell you what Churchill said, but first I will tell you that liberal democracy claims that it has universal appeal. What Churchill said, and I'm going to paraphrase it, he said democracy is a horrible, horrible, horrible type of government, except when you compare it to all the other types of government that ever existed and exist now, then it looks really good. Thank you.
Yeah, we want to encourage all of you, as the discussion is going along, when those questions come up, feel free to go ahead and write them down and submit those so we can be prepared to share those questions with our speakers. Our next speaker is Mr. Abdul Mando, who is Chief Development Officer for the Islamic Understanding Institute. He has a background. You'll understand why he's here and what he brings to this discussion as you hear his background. He was Senior Advisor for the Muslim Student Association at the University of Pennsylvania from 1985 through 1999. He's Coordinator and Religious Advisor to Booz Allen and Hamilton, a very prestigious company out of Washington, D.C. that does lobbying and public affairs. And he did that in relationship to a training effort at the Naval Station at Whiting Field in Milton, where they were part of an effort to train the international training students who were coming in to the military there. Prior to that, he was coordinator and religious advisor to the Navy's program, which provided Navy education training for international military students. And he is currently the Islamic Study Instructor and Director of Muslim Youth Program at the Islamic Center of Northwest Florida. Mr. Mando, we're pleased to have you with us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I did all those programs when I was carrying with me the what we call it, the work permission. And then I got my green card, and I still working with Booz Allen Hamilton just prior to the terrible, tragic incident happened on September 11. And then just a few months ago, I had my American passport in my hand. After 28 years waiting, speaking about voting, now guess what? Be ready for this. I'll be the first Mendo member in a huge family in Syria that they ever vote for presidency of a country. As a matter of fact, I'll be the first one probably this year to vote in my entire neighborhood that I was born and raised upon. And my family was talking to them just 3 days ago, and I told them me and my wife, we are going to vote, and that is really a fruit and enjoying what we call the democracy. Thank you so much. I really looking forward for that. Having said that, I am going to introduce to you today a new guest in terms of the political movement, a term that probably you never heard about. It is an Islamic term, but it is an Arabic word called shura, S-H-U-R-A. And shura is nothing but a mutual consultation. Al-Farabi, who is an excellent Islamic scholar who studied the Ibn Khaldun, who lived in the 6th century, and talking about the Islamic calendar, about 8th century, 700, 750 after Christ. And this man studied the concept of shura, the consultation, and with the help of Ibn Sina, Avicenna, they found out that the concept of consultation, it is in human bodies, psyche, and flesh. In other words, when you're born, the willing of consulting others, it is in you. And that goes way back in the history of humanity. And I can go, and that leads me to tell you that the concept of shura, it is a Hebrew and Arabic word, comes from the verb shara, or stashara, meaning shara, meaning to separate the wax from honey, to produce a pure and delicious honey. You cannot enjoy honey with the wax, but when you separate the wax from honey, then it will be really delicious and nice to enjoy. That's what shara, meaning that you let people go and debate and consult each other. In the end, you ask them what you came up with. Give me your opinion. And you collect all those opinions and you come up with the best solution for a certain matter. Now, very classical example, when Queen Sheba received a letter from King David. In our tradition, in the Muslim tradition, we consider him one of the greatest prophet. She received a letter from King David asking her to join him in worshiping methodology and certain ideology, to share with him, not to force, but to share with him that concept of worshiping. So he sent her a letter. And instead of Queen Sheba, instead of responding to him immediately, she gathered what they used to call at that time the Majlis al-Shura, the consultative council, or consultative body. In other words, like what you call it right now, the parliament. So she gathered them and she said, I received a letter from King David. What do you think? So they studied the matter and they started open the debate, and finally, in the end, they came to a conclusion and they said, you are our leader. That's very awesome to, when I talk about women as a leader. Honestly, I feel it's just, that makes me so happy, because it's an awesome in the future to see, for instance, like a president of Syria. Isn't that would be awesome, woman? That would be great. That would be awesome. So Queen Sheba, she decided that to listen to them, and they said, you are our leader, you go ahead and do whatever you feel better for our nation. And goes on. Now, about to this term, Shura, to be pure Islamic, Quraysh, which is the tribe of Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, it was a tribe that controlling all the business around the area and the Arabic Peninsula. And they were controlling every aspect that I can imagine. Yet, the masters of Quraysh, the master of that tribe, they were controlling and they're ready to make a decision, anything they want. Instead, they established something called Darun Nadwa, the house of Nadwa, meaning that the Nadwa, the house of consultation, to share, to open a debate. And anytime they want to take a decision, they gather. And my point here, it is not as Muslims, they consider it like it was born and came with the Quran itself. It is before the Quran. When the Quran, the book of the God of the Muslim, Allah, when we received that revelation through Prophet Muhammad, made it clear in some verses in the Quran that it is an Islamic, an Abrahamic concept and method, and must be continued as long as there is a Muslim, there is humanity. And that came in different verses. I will mention one of them. God says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. And those describing those believers in the Prophet, those people who establish prayer, and those whose affair are decided by mutual consultation. By mutual consultation. In other words, if you are a believer in this religion, you have to adopt and implement the method of Shura as a way of life and the method of life. Now, during this the time of Prophet himself embodiment this method in his daily life in many examples. I don't have time really to discuss all of this. But what happened, instead of the Muslims continue using this method as a part of their life, and one more thing I have to mention before I go to the next step. The Shura, from the verse, is developed a method, not only a method of politics, it's not a Shura in politics, in the political system and in political process, but also Shura must be established in economical field, in economical services, in political services, in social services, in medical services. In all affairs, there is a Shura establishment built for the certain affair. Now, after the successor of Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr, and then Umar. Umar, I have to mention that this man, his second Khalifa means successor of the Prophet. Umar, he really took this method seriously and slowed down all the Shura economically and socially, and he promoted and he supported the political Shura, which at his time, during his time, gave himself or gave the Muslim world the first gift in the Shura system, when he gathered 6 among the Prophet companion, and he said, I am sick, I'm about to departure to my Lord, I want you to gather and consult and open a debate and select one among you to be the next Khalifa after me. And that was the first establishment and the first rock and cornerstone in the Shura system. What happened after that, really, sadly, that for 1,000 years, the Shura system been miraculously has been put on the shelf, and instead of promoting the political Shura, they promote economic and social Shura, and made the circulation and rotating the power of ruling from the Shura system to inheriting system. The father give the power to his son, and his son to his uncle, and so forth. That's what I can over. I wish I can go more. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next in the question and answer.
You can see that we have created a considerable challenge for our speakers to be able to cover a very broad subject in a short amount of time. It's my hope that we can have a similar forum like this in the future, where we invite the rest of the community and add a little more time to it so we can have a full, a more in-depth discussion. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Alex Galvin, who's an FSU student in the Department of International Affairs within the Department of Political Science. Mr. Galvin is the director of the Center for Foreign Policy Studies at Florida State University and is a growing expert in the field of Mideast politics and international relations. He also served as president of the Muslim Student Association at Florida State University, where he was named a Garnet and Gold Scholar at FSU. And something I can appreciate, because many years ago in my past life I served in the legislature, and I was very interested to see that he received a certificate of appreciation for service from the Senate of the state of Florida. He's a member of the Tallahassee Committee on Foreign Relations and regularly speaks on Islam and U.S. foreign policy. Mr. Galvin, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clemens, Dr. Butler, and folks here at Gulf Coast State College. It's a pleasure to come here and speak to you today. I want to really ask that you give yourselves an applause for coming out for something like this, because really when you take part in things like this here at your institution, you are enriching yourselves that step further that your educators and your professors and the faculty want you. They want to push yourselves so that you can get as best of an education as you can while you're spending your time here at this institution. And you all deserve a round of applause for that. So thank you for coming out today. As mentioned earlier about Shura, it is something that has roots in history that shows how effective a Shura governance can be when it's implicated correctly. So that when it's actually put to the best of its uses, it actually has the potential to bring about a very good, uncorrupt governance structure. Unfortunately, in today's society, there are countries in the Middle East that do have Shuras in their system, and they're pretty corrupt, unfortunately. But going back a little bit further, I wanted to start at the beginning that Shura is mentioned not once in the Quran, not twice, but actually 3 specific times that I can think of in Surah Al-Baqarah, which is the 2nd surah of the Quran, as well as Surah Al-Imran, and of course having its own surah named after it, Ash-Shura. Government changed by elections, and I want to talk about what Dr. Fistine was saying. This is something that was thought about at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So when he was revealing the Quran, these were things that were set down. If you subscribe to the Islamic faith, you would understand that these were things that were inherent in society that took many of Western society to figure out later on down the road, as he did when he was asking for those of you who could vote. This was something that actually took place within Islamic society much further back. Some similarities between the Shura and Western democracy are, we see in today's examples with Turkey, that they actually operate under a secular democracy. Morocco operates under a constitutional monarchy, which is a lot like the United Kingdom. But with Morocco, the unfortunate thing is that although the king is not elected, he succeeds from his father, many of the parliamentary structures within the Kingdom of Morocco are elected. Unfortunately, within the cabinet and a lot of these positions, a lot of the king's families and friends tend to kind of get positions within parliament, so that whenever issues come up that pertain to keeping authority to the throne, those type of votes don't really seem to come up a lot. And that really kind of shows how that is a similarity that we have here in the United States. So just because it pertains to an Islamic country doesn't mean that the United States government is not also unable to be influenced by the same type of thing. We have corruption just as much as any other type of society, but because we don't see it as corruption, it's not corruption. So one thing that I want to kind of start off with and giving you guys a good definition for is making sure that we're not seeing Western democracy as being tied to capitalism. Now, when most people, especially if you subscribe to a gentleman by the name of Samuel Huntington, who wrote on the conflict of, I can't remember the name of that, conflict of, oh well, anyway, Huntington's argument was that the Middle East, especially with regard to Islam, was that it's not applicable with democracy. And this is, I guess, a very biased, perspective. But then when we looked at what happened in 2011, the Arab Spring kind of showed us that, well, not everything is set in stone. In fact, I remember a lot of my professors walking into classes at FSU and telling us right after the Tunisian government fell, and then shortly thereafter the Egyptian government falling, saying, okay, I don't know any more now than you guys do. We're going to have to rewrite all the books on all of this stuff. So it really goes to show that when people have the opportunity to fight for themselves, and they'll actually go back to what they were wanting to do. And this is with regard to the idea of self-governance within Islamic societies. Now, this was something that had been being preached about in mosques and lots of other places that were those bastions of pluralistic societies, and that everyone should be included, and we needed to get back to Islamic principles, and we needed to get back to an understanding of the Quran, and we needed to get God in our life, kind of like what the GOP is doing here in American society, wanting us to get back to a more religious mindset, a more conservative mindset. But although, even though it's a political party, it tends to side with religious fundamentalism, just like you have in Arab countries. You have politics then siding with religious fundamentalism, and sometimes it's not the best for either the religious group or the political group. In Pakistan, they also have a bicameral parliament, which is called the Majlis-e-Shura. So you have several countries, Turkey, Morocco, Pakistan, Egypt, which has an upper house called the Shura Council. You have Indonesia and Saudi Arabia in 1993. Now, the interesting thing about Saudi Arabia is that although they received their Shura Council in 1993, Saudi Arabia's Shura Council is strictly a consultative body. They don't really make any rules, so they don't have a parliamentary structure like you see in other westernized, I guess you could say, Islamic countries like Egypt, Tunisia, and such. The thing about Saudi Arabia is that although they are consultative in nature, they don't really have any power. The supreme authority in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia lies within the throne. And the throne is selected by members of the royal family. So nobody in Saudi Arabia has a pick on who's going to succeed unless you are a member of the royal family. In Oman, the same thing happens in Oman. Everyone is elected except by a Shura council except the president. The Shura council pretty much is elected for everyone within that state. Iran also has an assembly of experts, which actually, many of you guys may not know this, has the ability to impeach the Ayatollah. So the supreme leader who is actually over Ahmadinejad, who is the president of Iran, has more power than Ahmadinejad. He doesn't have really any power other than to be able to dissolve parliament in Iran. But the council in Iran actually can depose the supreme leader, which is something that is almost unheard of. Like, I don't see it happening anytime soon, but they have that power. But the good thing about that for the Ayatollah's standpoint is that he enjoys such wonderful support from members of this council. So if you're a member of this council, you most likely are going to support him no matter what. Now, taking a look at revolutions within the Mideast, in 1991 in Iraq, Shuras played a fundamental role in the revolution that happened in Iraq. And this functioned as a form of participatory democracy. This was something that we were not really sure what was going to pan out, especially from a U.S. geopolitical perspective. We were not sure exactly how this was going to affect the region at the time. And so, much like we did with what's going on in Syria, or much like we're doing right now with Syria, we're taking a hands-off approach right now because we don't really know what's going to happen, and that actually is really hurting America's soft power. One of the best examples I can give is from a modern Islamic standpoint. Most modern Islamic scholars review or regard Shura as being the best of what is available out there. And they break it down into three main categories. The first being that everyone is equal in human and civil rights. Now, this you kind of have to take with a grain of salt. This is, though, modern Islamic scholars, but we're talking about its application being to put to its best use. So we can't necessarily say that this is widely believed upon when, for instance, we can say the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia does not allow women the right to drive, and they do not have the right to vote yet, although the kingdom has recently said that they are considering possibly letting women take a vote in local regional elections, I think in 4 more years? The second is that public issues are best decided by a majority view, which I think that all Western scholars and all Western democracies would agree on, that this is something that, without equivocation, best serves everybody's interest. And the third and final thing is that the 3 other principles of justice, equality, and human dignity are best represented by a Shura government. So the modern Islamic scholars are telling us that, one, that everyone is equal and has equal rights and civil rights. That 2, it's decided by a majority view is the best thing for everybody, and that the Shura government is the best way to implement this. Now, for those of you guys who are trying to, I may have spoken a little too fast and you're trying to write things down for your extra credit things, we'll give a chance to reiterate what we've said here again in a few minutes, but that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Once again, as you see Dr. Butler walking up there, just remember that if you have questions, go ahead and provide those to her. At this point in our agenda, we're going to continue the conversation by allowing each of the previous speakers to take a moment, take about 4 or 5 minutes to speak in reaction to what they are hearing from the other speakers. So, and then after that, we will address your questions. Dr. Fistine, I'll go to you first.
Okay, thank you.
And I think to make us all a little more comfortable, if we all just exchange the microphone so you can stay seated.
Thank you. I'm going to make two quick comments, and since the time is short, I do have some questions for you. So I want to use that, but just two things. You compared the corruption in the United States to the corruption in the Middle East. One of the great things about liberal democracies is they cut down on corruption. There are many very critical articles about our governmental system that, that claim, especially the fact that the rich have a lot more power than the poor. They can, a guy gives $100 million to a political party. But generally corruption in, I would not compare, dictatorships and liberal democracies on corruption, because the dictatorships are always going to lose. And the other thing that I caught on is just kind of a technical thing. Revolutions, to me, are not a proof of democracy, because usually revolutions end in dictatorships, and very few of them end up in a democracy. Obviously, the American one did, the French one did, but that didn't. So, yeah, that's just a technical thing. I have some questions for you. First of all, and I kind of want to challenge you. I'm not attacking, but I want to challenge you. Is Sharia a substitute for Western democracy, or is it complementary?
I think, getting back to what you were saying in the beginning about with regard to the corruption issue, it wasn't. I didn't mean to say that it was that one has corruption and the other one doesn't. What I was trying to say is that there are varying levels of corruption within both groups, especially in. And you're absolutely right with regard to democracy being a major cut down in the amount of type of corruption that's available, as opposed to a dictatorship. Unfortunately, when it comes to dictatorships, they just seem to be more effective whenever you look at how open government structure has to be. Like, for instance, in Western democracies, you must declare a motion and say, well, we're going to move all of our troops over to here, but then it's out in the open because you have to get a congressional resolution. You have to then go out and say that we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and everyone is aware of what you're doing. Whereas in a dictatorship, it's just a little bit more effective in the sense that you're just going to do it no matter what anybody says. But with regard to the corruption issue, there's corruption seen in as far as cronyism, especially with. Like I was speaking about with the Kingdom of Morocco, and the king having a lot of his family and a lot of his supporters in those cabinet positions, and really kind of not allowing anyone else to get into those positions. And we kind of do that here a little bit, but maybe not to the same extent, definitely not. And what you're talking about with Shura, I would say it's complementary to Western democracy, because Western democracy is a very wonderful thing, but we have to keep in mind that as these revolutions play out, and you're absolutely right that most of them do turn into dictatorships after revolution, that as these revolutions play out, we have to understand that we can't be so American-centric in the sense that, well, what we have is the best thing for you and you're going to take it, so you're just take it all right now, just here, take it all. Unfortunately, people have to kind of be weaned into these types of things. We're talking about societies, especially in the Middle East, that really have trouble accepting certain things. For instance, in Iran, for example, if you're a woman and you go out there, and we're talking about a woman's protest here, if you show just this much hair under your hijab, man, you're a wild girl. You're like Girls Gone Wild. This is definitely gonna really upset a lot of the leadership. So then, by saying that, are these people now going to openly embrace a woman's right to be able to walk down the street in Daisy Dukes and stuff like that? No, absolutely not. We're talking cultural acceptance of a lot of Western views that it's going to take time. But I think that over the long period of time, and once everything's been said and done, I think that the Shura governance structure would be very complementary to a Western democracy structure. I think they would be able to work, especially with countries like, for instance, here in the United States, we don't have a country, or we're not supposed to have a country that has a religious code, but in these countries that do subscribe to a religious structure, I think that Shura governance structure would be very complementary and actually work to the benefit of the entire country once everything is able to be meshed together.
Now, I want to really share with you this, and I said it after a long time study. There is nothing right now, if you go and search about a method, a political method, system called system of Shura, complete Shura system, ready right now to be implemented, or it is implementing right now while we're speaking, you can't find such a thing. There is nothing. There is a thought, and there is a, again, I'm talking about the political part. You remember I spoke, Shura is a different kind of Shura, and the top of it that we everybody dream about is political Shura to be, to rise to a degree that will be really a system, method, a complete system, so that in Syria, after Bashar Assad fall, we will take that method, and here you go, right now we're going to implement the system, and we'll go towards fair justice and like what they're doing right now in the other words. There is nothing. And to prove my point to you, right now, look at what's going on in Tunisia right now. They are borrowing a huge chunk of democracy system. In Egypt right now, if they have the Shura system ready, they wouldn't even mention something democracy. And I'll add this. Now, at the time the Ottoman Empire fall in 1912 to 1920, no one in that region, in the whole Muslim world, knows anything about something called democracy. Now what happened, because of the Ottoman Empire fall down, and now all of a sudden those countries, they are searching and looking for something so that they can come on and just continue and replace the Ottomanic Ottoman representative in their country. Instead of what happened in Europe, Great Britain and France, they appointed dictators in those countries, and that's what my Sheikh Jawad Saeed considered the first Arabic Spring. This one is the second. The difference between second and first, that the dictatorship assigned and appointed by the European and Western country, or Western democracy, and they appoint those people to be dictators. And those dictators, they dusted off, as a matter of fact, in the end of the 18th century, Muhammad Ali, who is the Egyptian ruler, who all of a sudden, after the Ottoman Empire fall, he started sending the students from Al-Azhar University to the European countries to seek knowledge and find a solution for the problem that caused, and as a result of the last part of Ottoman Empire. Now what they came up with, they came back from France, like for Muhammad Abduh and Abdurrahman al-Kawakibi and Rashid Rida, all those Muslim scholars, they came back from Paris with something called democracy. In 1912, we didn't have a radio, and in our region, in the Arabic countries, to hear about what's going on around the world, all we have in our hand, that's certain newspapers. And all of a sudden, those people, they came back, those scholars, with no idea called democracy. And Muhammad Ali, when he heard about democracy from those students, they came back, he established all of a sudden that was Majlis Shura, the consultative body of counseling. And 3 years later, this Majlis that been established overnight, who has no power, he cannot make any decision, this give a consultation. They fall down, and the books after books of those scholars, they wrote books about how they amazed and fascinating by a term called democracy. So the term that I remember I was talking, I said this term been shelved. They dusted off the Shura system, they dusted off, and they all of a sudden they came back to it, and they want to do something about it to make something really compatible or compatible to democracy.
I brought the Freedom House rankings of democracies, and Indonesia is the first Muslim democracy, number 6. Not a very good track record. How would you, within what you've been discussing, so there's the tradition that's there, but it's not being implemented in any of those countries. Like, what are the chances of that, somebody like Egypt or Tunisia, getting up further up on top on the freedom list?
I think that over time, those countries like Egypt or Tunisia will get up there. I really believe that because of their geographical area and their ability to be influenced by Europe will really help them as they progress further along with their political structuring of their countries. Like I was saying earlier, I was giving Indonesia as like an example of countries that have that consultative body in which they seek a collective idea. Now, unfortunately, we look at that as something that's very negative. We would say, oh, well, I know, I'm familiar with the Freedom House's rankings, and we would look at that and say, well, you don't have a really high score here because you don't have this, 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 and this. You don't really fit the Western ideology of what a democracy is. But if these people are elected by the Shura, or these Shura members are elected by the people of their country, and they choose to adopt these policies, then is that not the same thing as democracy? Is that not, granted it differs from our view,
Yes.
like very drastically.
Well, it is and it isn't, in the sense that minority rights, and I'm not talking about minorities, racial minorities or religious minorities, but I'm taking those who are in the minority are another big
Underrepresented.
Yeah.
Or not represented.
Yeah, they're not represented, but protecting them is a big part of liberal, ideology, is that there has to be some form of protecting those. For Madison, it was property. He's afraid that people who have property will who don't have property will take it away.
We'll take it away from those that do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I personally am not an advocate for a lot of these countries. I was just using them as an example of countries that have adopted that structure. Now, like I was saying before, that these are countries that they've chosen these leaders. In some cases not, though, unfortunately. I can't say the same is true for places like Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Morocco, these places that have monarchies. That it's actually working against the people there. And I know I have quite a lot of experience with some of my family being under King Mohammed VI's rule in the Kingdom of Morocco. So I've had family members beaten by the police when they tried to protest in Casablanca and in Rabat. But these are people that when you see those types of things, you kind of have hope for them, and that you want to see a change for their future. You want to see those people whose voices aren't being represented. And like you're saying, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of patience on Western democracies' parts. These are countries that didn't industrialize at the same time that we did. So we actually are, leading the pack, so to speak, because we had that ability to be the leader of the world much sooner than anyone else did. So these countries all kind of fell by the wayside until they were.
I'm hesitant to stop this conversation because it's great. And I really want to be fair to the people who submitted some questions, because we do have some good questions here. Now, the first question, I want to acknowledge this because I think it's the core of what we're talking about, but I think you've already addressed it through the question that Dr. Fistine asked. And that question, and I'm going to ask you to only respond if you think there's something we haven't addressed, and it is, how can the Shura system be conciliated with liberal democracy? I think you had a good, thorough conversation on that a moment ago. Is there anything else you would like to add
Well,
to that?
I would say that Western democracy is I would say that Western democracy is kind of like a shore system, and like Brother Armando was talking about, he said that it was like they had taken the shore system, dusted it off, and then all of a sudden it became democracy. But if we look at what I was explaining about the contemporary Islamic scholars saying that it is that everyone has equal representation and everyone has equal rights, civil rights, and that the majority rule or majority opinion works, that's kind of like what democracy is in a sense. Unfortunately, it's not been implemented, and the reason why I actually said that would be a complementary type of thing to that is that from a Western perspective, we would never accept something like that as being democracy just simply because it has an Islamic connotation to it. So in Islamic society, it would be very complementary, but here in, say, Western society, I would say it's kind of the same thing, because you're saying that everyone is equal under the same constitution, and that everyone should have the ability to collectively rule themselves. And I think that's what I've touched on earlier.
Good. This is I'm going to combine two questions, and I'm going to direct it to Mr. Mando. Because one of the questions said, have you lived in the Middle East, and if yes, where and for how long? And I'm partly going to interpret that to mean, well, how does that affect your view of Sharia and Western democracy? So I'm taking that question and I'm combining it. And this question then says, in your experiences with common citizens of Islam, those who are not in power, do the people wish for Sharia? And do you feel that common citizens have a reasonable expectation to achieve Sharia government?
I was born in 1953 in the city of Homs in Syria. Went to school and graduated from Aleppo University in 1979. And Syria was completely under the Soviet Union pressure, or was completely ruled indirectly by Soviet Union. Hafez Assad, the father, was the dictator that he ruled Syria for a long time, and he was the man of the Soviet Union in the region. One of the things that was strange in Syria, like I believe in Cuba, as Fidel Castro came up with this an idea, when you graduate as an engineer or a physician from the college, you don't go to your own life. You should serve in the army for 5 years, and that's mandatory. You have no choice whatsoever. And I believe in 1970 and 1980 was a civil war in the city of Hama, where my mother, and which is a strange combination, very strange to find a father from Hama, a husband and wife from Homs, and one wife from Hama, because they always like a joke about each other. And so the solution to go in my life, and since I was a student and college student, I was really upset, and they called me, my friends and my classmates, they said, you got a big mouth, you should shut up. Otherwise, you are going to be in deep trouble. And I couldn't, to a day that in the laboratory, and the lab and the professors, all of them graduated from Soviet Union and assigned to run the engineering college. So I want to just make the short story, long story short. When I graduated, I finished examination, and my dad has some connection, got me a passport, and I flee to Saudi Arabia. At the time, the conflict in Aleppo, they call it the Madrasa al-Madfa'iyya, the tank school, the military school in Aleppo, where it's about 160 Alawi, was destroyed by the Muslim Brotherhood activists. So one of the people that I was really get involved in this situation indirectly, because I never been organized by the Muslim Brotherhood, never ever have been organized with anybody. And all the time I was one of those followers of Sufi, So but my roommate, I was living with the 4 Muslim Brotherhood who were the leaders. And all of a sudden my father became very, very suspicious because living with those people. So Hafez Assad sent some people to my home in Homs and asked my father to bring me. They took my brother, but they released him after that just because my father was able to pay some money. Now, overnight, I found myself in Saudi Arabia. And from Saudi Arabia, after 6 years working with the Siemens company as medical equipment, and I came to United States of America to continue my education. Now, the second part of the question, absolutely, when I came here, I learned a lot. First of all, I found a different world, and me and my children, that's why I came here with 2 children, and I said, man, it's my chance. Go ahead and produce 6 other American children. So I have 8 of total. And I always keep myself, I don't want to mention that, but somehow things get me into mentioning that. Now, after 6 American children, I start thinking seriously about the future. There is something, and while I was staying here, every day before what was going on in Syria, hopefully Assad gets sick. One day he was just very critical. I said, oh my goodness, it's a chance to go back home. And Mr. Assad got, like a cat, he has 9 souls, as they say, stayed until year 2000. Now here is his son take over, and I find out there is no hope. Why don't settle here and find out how you can really find a reconciliation with the society and start for better future. So I find no resistance and no choice but to work with the society and reach my hand to others and think globally, think universally, and got better future for my children and my people back home in Syria.
Great, thank you. This is a question directed to Dr. Fista. And I'm going to read this word for word, but you say democracy must start where it is today, but can't explain why. Now, there's a follow-up to that.
Okay.
Why must it start for other countries where it is today? I think where democracy is in the United States today, I think is what they mean. It seems each country should have to struggle through an infancy and adolescent stage of democracy. Humans don't start as adults, and maybe democracy should not. Last part, I'm abridging it a little bit. I think you understand the
Yes,
question.
I understand the question, and I do have an answer for you right now. It's very simple. If we're a kingdom, and I say to you, people, we're going to have democracy. Actually, first there's a little bit of pressure by you people, demonstrations and stuff like that, and I say, okay, I want to have a democracy. I'm going to step aside, and those who are 21 years old and own property will be able to vote. You're not going to stop your protests. You're not going to be happy with that. That is just not a starting point anymore. Again, if I proclaim democracy and say women can't vote, maybe we're the kind of society where you're going to accept that. But as I was talking about the Freedom House rankings, but other countries will not accept that. The pressure is on from other countries who are democratic to be more like them. I would say the best example is Eastern Europe, where the people would very much like to say, hey, we'll take democracy and majority rule, but we're going to oppress our minorities. We don't like the gypsies, and we don't like the Turks in Bulgaria, and we don't like these people. We're going to continue to disadvantage them. The answer would be from the Western countries, no, you can't do that because we respect our minorities. So it's a combination of would the people be okay with it if we went all the, we had our own starting point, and would other democracies respect you as a democracy? And both of those, I would say no, it won't work internally and it won't work externally.
Let me get to this next question. You may come back to it. This is a little different. There was a reference to this in one of the comments before. It says, is nepotism as alive and well in the U.S. and Morocco as well as other parts of the world? I frankly don't remember who made that. There was somebody who made a comment about how we've gone into a system. I don't know if they used the word nepotism or it might have been primogeniture, we're,
I'm going to throw in something. I can't answer that question, but I do want to mention, since you were talking about that earlier, Morocco is considered a constitutional democracy.
Constitutional monarchy.
Yeah, a constitutional monarchy with, yeah, with an elected parliament. We represented Morocco in our model United Nations class last time. So, Morocco is, by the Western powers, is probably, they're probably overestimating the level of democracy in Morocco.
I think so. I think they are.
anybody want to take that nepotism question? I don't know if that comes out of the observation that, that there's like Assad, where power passed from one family member to another,
It does, yeah.
or, so you would like to address
Well,
that?
with regard to the difference between Syria and Morocco is that Syria is a president and not a king, although he's like a presidential king. In Morocco, it is a king. And the son, Mohammed VI, did not take over from Hassan II until his father died. Like literally, his father died, and then Mohammed VI was sworn in as the next king. So that's the way it works in the Kingdom of Morocco. And I would say that it's worked that way for a long time, but under French rule until I want to say the 1950s, until they got their independence from France, that's pretty much how it played out, with the sultans being, the next person down was chosen in like a line of succession.
Dr. Butler, we have time for one more question. Okay, I'm going to direct this to you, Mr. Mando, and you can weave that other answer in. This is direct to you. Are you against Western democracy? The follow-up is, your explanation of Shura sounds as though it would work well with democracy.
Well, I think it's an excellent question. Now, my part here just to speak about Shura, and there is no way I'm here to suggest in any way that you guys start thinking about Shura because it's good for you and it might be better than democracy in the future. That's not my suggestion. I don't want you to think about that like that, honestly. But here's what was fascinating me the most. Tariq Ramadan, he is the son-in-law of Hassan al-Banna, who is the establisher or the founder of Islamic Brotherhood Party. He wrote a book, Why the Muslims, Not the Arabic World. And in the book, he suggests that there is something wrong when we say the Shura as an Islamic term and look at the Muslim world as a general. The Arabic part, which is the Middle East, speaking, they either refused to try democracy or they tried it and failed. Why is it they fail in the Arabic countries and some way or the other there is success, a degree of success in the Muslim countries? Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, whether we like it or not, there is almost 160 million Muslims in India. Not to mention the other countries. Most of the Muslim countries, I really don't share, we are not in the same page with my dear friend, the doctor, about Indonesia is not going well. It is going, but it is not going very well. And as a matter of fact, they are in the right track. Because the simple fact that they found a formula to match or they found a recipe between democracy, the Western democracy, and Shura, and right now they are in the process of forming. And year after year, they are improving to the whole world that they are in the right track. They didn't reach the joy of democracy that we are enjoying here or not. Now, this is very, very important. I'm in favor of in letting the American or the Western world know that the Arabic world, the Arabic countries, even though they really under that depression and that difficult circumstances, but they have a lot of potential in them, in their skills, and their life, and their psyche. They are ready to reach that recipe of mixing both of them. Now, Muhammad al-Ghazali, who died in 1965, when he heard about democracy and he read about it, he said, that's the gift from God. Muhammad Iqbal from Pakistan and Malik ibn Nabi from Algeria, he said, that is the shura. Democracy is the shura that we're looking for. But that was in 1958, 59, and now, you know, it's us to complement. Look, as long as we see other people, in order to see democracy in the other world, they drink like us, they sleep like us, they dress like us, and they eat like us, and their life like us, is not going to be democracy that we're looking for. We have to change our side that there is a potential over there. Those people, they are human beings, they have dignity, and they can do it. And they do it, but it's not necessarily to do it the way that we look at it. In other words, in our microscope, on telescope that we look at the world, it got to be, our lenses need to be clean. Thank you, sir.
The hardest part of my assignment today, the most uncomfortable part, is slowing down what has been great discussion. This has just been absolutely fantastic. I'm going to turn the microphone over here in a moment, but I want to do two things. Number one, I want to suggest to you that this is a conversation that really justifies a much longer event. And I hope that we will be able to do that another day here at Gulf Coast State College. And so I invite you to do that if we can have that opportunity in the future. The second thing I would suggest you do, if you haven't already, take a moment, take time to visit the Islamic Understanding Institute. It is in the Lincoln Center at the corner of Highway 98 and Jinx Avenue. It's a wonderful place to get a better understanding of the Islamic religion and culture. And right there in that center, co-located, is the Avicenna Clinic, which is a clinic that Mr. Emelsky helped create for those who can't afford to get the medical care that they need. It's a great service to the community. So I invite you to take time to do that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jeff Stevenson.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. I want to recognize all the people who went into making this day possible. Dr. Curley, the president, and I had another meeting. We could not be here, but there's a lot of meetings. This just doesn't happen by itself. I want to recognize Dr. Susan Butler. She really is the main contact person here at the college. And our assistant over there, Wanda Maddox, who really prepared a number of things for us. And then our great speakers. And then Scott Clements, who Mr. Emelsky wanted Scott to do this. And Scott was willing to do it because he realizes how important it is. I hope it went well for you. Would you please give these people a round of applause? We really appreciate you coming. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.